tremendous interest, and we see that in the level of participation. Big group of people here at this year's event, lots from outside of the African continent, strong representation from many African countries, and I think it all talks about the increased level of interest in Africa at this time.
Yeah. Now, in terms of that interest, where are you finding that interest going?
Well, from a sector perspective, obviously natural resources continue to be a big area of interest, but increasingly we're seeing telecommunications, construction, tourism, telecommunications, so it's starting to spread out into other sectors.
Yeah.
As far as geography is concerned, markets like Nigeria, South Africa, some of the North African countries, but again, it's starting to become more of a widespread base of interest in the whole continent.
Yeah. Now, in terms of the people who are interested, who is interested, Mark?
Well, this is what's so interesting.
Yeah.
We're seeing very strong interest from many of the high growth markets. And so over the last couple of years, we've seen a tremendous increase in the amount of investment, both in terms of number of projects, but also value from markets like India, China, Russia, some of the South American countries, even the Middle East.
Yeah.
And I think it's driven by a number of things. The strong growth in their own economies and their need for natural resources. The fact that we have big organizations being built up in many of those economies who are wanting to become global players. But also the fact that when you look around the world today, where are there opportunities for growth? Well, Europe doesn't present the opportunities it used to. North America is not growing as fast as it did. So Africa all of a sudden becomes a real place of interest.
Yeah, but I suppose it's not going to be interest that's going to be permanent. This is really an opportunity that Africa ought to be taking advantage of. What needs to be fixed in order to maximize the opportunity that's available?
Well, I think unfortunately there are still lots of misconceptions about Africa. Whilst people are beginning to recognize that there is progress in terms of political and social stability, the continent does need to market itself better. I think we need to see a lot more in terms of interaction between African countries to make it easier for investors to work in multiple countries. Things like taxes, trade barriers, immigration between countries. And there is something about creating an attractive platform for investment and providing investors with certainty. So are their investments going to be protected? Are they going to be long-term investments on which they can generate a return?
And what's your sense in terms of your interactions with businesses and in terms of interactions with the regulators? What feeling are you getting in terms of those issues being addressed?
Oh, I think a lot of progress is being made. I mean, we've heard it over the last few days at WEF, the efforts being made between African countries to try and increase the level of interaction, reduce some of the barriers that exist between them, so I think that's really positive. Many countries are making really good progress around providing a stable regulatory environment and certainty in relation to taxes, property rights and ownership. So I think there is a lot of progress being made, and that's part of the reason why the interest in Africa is increasing.
Now, in terms of that interest, now we talked about the new kind of investor that is looking at Africa, so we talk about people coming out of China and India, in addition, of course, to the traditional investors that have come out of the West. But in the West, are you getting any sense that Africa is beginning to attract investors that have not previously looked at Africa? And which sectors are they from? Yeah,
I think in terms of new investors, consumer products is probably one of the biggest ones. So people are recognizing there is a big population base. It's a very young population base, 2/3 of the people under 23. And in terms of a long-term market, that's very attractive if you're in consumer products. Telecommunications is another area where we're seeing new investors who haven't previously been on the continent seeing big opportunities here.
And lastly, Mark, in terms of this window of opportunity for Africa, can I make it difficult for you by asking how long you think it will last?
Yeah, I don't have a crystal ball that answers that question, but I think that it is a perfect time now. We've seen tremendous stresses and strains in many of the markets of the world, including Africa, but not to the same extent as some of the more mature markets. And they will start to get through their problems and will provide alternative destinations for investment. So right now is a wonderful time for Africa really to put itself on the map in terms of the global economy.